at the police station where an officer called out to Seoryeong, reminding her that she mentioned her husband had begun acting strangely the previous night. He asked if she could explain what exactly seemed strange about him and if she was able to elaborate. Taking a brief pause, Seoryeong stuttered to say in bed, while she frowned with blood scattered across her clothes. She remembered that in their 2 years of marriage, she had never been so drenched in sweat while they were having that together. Convinced that he had lost his mind, she recalled how her husband had come closer as she tried to call out his name. She thought about how he had always been considerate and gentle toward her, especially since she could not see. She asked him to wait, but Kim Hyun had refused, saying there was no time. Seoryeong had begged for at least a moment to breathe. She wondered how a man who was once so calm and composed, even during intimacy, could suddenly change like this. She recalled him whispering that for the mark to last, it had to hurt. Seoryeong questioned what he meant, but before she could say more, he kissed her roughly, his tongue tracing deep inside her. She heard him say that she should never do things like this with anyone else. She had been confused, asking what he meant by that. Kim Hyun cursed under his breath, pleading softly for Seoryeong to take care of him just for that night, only for that moment. The next day, as Kim Hyun was preparing to leave for the office, Seoryeong mentioned that someone seemed to be moving out. Kim Hyun responded that things had been chaotic lately and asked if the noise was bothering her. She denied it, saying she was just curious since she was close to their neighbors and wanted to know who was leaving. Kim Hyun told her it would quiet down soon, and to draw her attention, he gently asked if she was all right, admitting he might have been too rough the night before. Seoryeong told him he had surprised her, recalling that he had sworn, something he never did. She confessed that it was her first time realizing how exhausting and painful such a thing could be. Taking a pause, she lightly pushed him away, suggesting they talk about it later after work. Kim Hyun nodded but suddenly hesitated, as if sensing something. He called out her name softly. In that strange and heavy silence, Seoryeong felt something indescribable, as though she had made eye contact with her husband despite her blindness. She could tell that he was not smiling. He said he would get going and left quietly. Seoryeong wanted to stop him and ask what was wrong, but the words never came out. She remembered the doctor's advice that overthinking every little thing could be a bad sign, yet she could not shake off her uneasiness. As the hours passed, midnight came, but Kim Hyun had still not returned home. Seoryeong grew anxious, remembering how he had always left work at exactly 7 o'clock, never a minute late, never breaking routine. He was the kind of man who would never leave her alone for long, knowing she could not see. But that night, he was unresponsive. Each time she called, the phone operator's message repeated that the number was unavailable or restricted. Her mind spiraled as she tried to reassure herself that there must be a reason, yet those thoughts tangled into fear. The longer she waited, the more dangerous the silence felt. She called again and again, but there was no reply. Frustrated, she cursed under her breath, questioning what on earth was happening. In her panic, she accidentally cut her finger, leaving blood splattered around her. Fear consumed her as two dreadful words echoed in her head: husband missing. Now, standing inside the police station, she felt weak as the officer cleared his throat and explained that a missing person report could not be filed until at least 24 hours had passed since the last contact. He added that they could not take immediate action unless there was proof of a crime. Stammering, Seoryeong asked what he meant by that. The officer replied calmly that a crime, for example, could be when someone tries to disguise an assault as a disappearance, and that she should be honest with them. He looked her over carefully as he noticed the knife in her hand and the blood scattered across her clothes. His tone grew firm as he questioned whose blood it was. After a long silence, she said quietly that if she told him the blood belonged to her husband, would he then find him first? The first time Seoryeong met her husband, Kim Hyun, she had just turned 24. He introduced himself politely, explaining that he was not the boss but merely an employee of the company, as the boss had stepped out for a while. It was around the time when she had first learned that there was a problem with her previously healthy retina. Her vision had begun to fade gradually, leaving her frightened and uncertain about her future. During their meeting, Kim Hyun helped her by handing her a cane she had dropped. His tone was calm, his movements careful, as though he already understood how fragile her confidence was. He asked if he could stay for a while until the rain outside stopped. Seoryeong had thought it was just an ordinary first encounter, something that would pass without meaning. Yet as she sat there, she kept questioning why she had to live depending on a cane, why her fate had turned so cruelly against her. She had always been told to live kindly, so she had lived kindly. She had worked hard, even taken a job as a caregiver, something far from what she once imagined for herself. Still, she wondered why she had to endure such misfortune, why her life had taken this path. In that moment of quiet frustration, Kim Hyun had excused himself for a second, then returned holding a cup of coffee. He said softly that she looked cold and offered it to her with a gentle smile. Seoryeong had remained silent, unsure of how to respond. For a moment, in a world that had lost all its light, it felt as though a faint warmth returned. The sound of his voice, the kindness in his tone, and the way he reached out to her, all made her feel as if light had touched her again. When he held her hand, she didn't pull away. In the present, Seoryeong stood frozen in front of the officer, unable to process what she had just heard. The officer told her that at this villa, the only occupied house was hers, and that all the other houses were empty. No one else lived there. He asked if she truly had not known this. Seoryeong cursed in disbelief, saying she had definitely greeted her neighbors every time she passed by and insisted there must have been some mistake. The officer shook his head, explaining that there were no other residents, and asked what kind of greeting she was talking about. Before she could respond, another officer interrupted, calling for the detective. He said he had just received a call from the station. There was no record of anyone named Kim Hyun in the resident registry. Seoryeong felt as though her entire body turned to stone as her mind went blank. Some days later, she found herself at the church. It had been a month since her husband disappeared, and the emptiness in her heart only grew heavier. She had begged the detectives repeatedly to continue the search, but they had refused. One of them cornered her gently, telling her to pull herself together, explaining that sympathy for her could only go so far. He said that if she continued showing up like this, they might have to detain her for obstructing official duties. Seoryeong pleaded for one last investigation, insisting that there must have been some error, but the detective denied her again. He stated firmly that there was no trace left in the system and asked what they were supposed to investigate when nothing existed. Seoryeong raised her voice, insisting that perhaps her husband had been targeted by a criminal organization, and that was why he vanished without a trace. But the detective dismissed the claim, reminding her that in her initial report, she had said she was covered in her husband's blood. He warned that if she wanted them to reopen the case, she might end up in trouble herself, as lying on record was not a trivial matter. Seoryeong shouted through tears, saying she had not suffered any financial loss, so what could he possibly have gained by deceiving her? The detective calmly replied that only the man who ran away would know the truth, and asked if she did not agree. In the present, Seoryeong stood in the corner of the church, lost in thought. The quiet around her felt suffocating until the priest entered and called out to her, mentioning that her face looked pale. He urged her to sit and rest for a while. Seoryeong thanked him politely and said she was fine, preparing to leave, but then paused. She turned back and asked if he truly believed in things he could not see. She apologized for saying something so blunt, but added that perhaps he didn't realize he was being deceived. She told him to open his eyes and not end up a fool like her. The priest looked at her with calm eyes and said that one did not always need to see something to know it existed. He asked if she really needed a reason to believe in something beyond sight. Seoryeong hesitated, whispering that she didn't know anymore. Her voice broke as tears welled up in her eyes. She said she didn't even know what he looked like, yet she had loved him first. She admitted that she had believed his hands were the warmest and largest she had ever held, and she thought he would be her salvation. To her, he had been unlike anyone in her world, a miracle she never thought she would experience. But then he had vanished, disappearing completely, as if he had evaporated into thin air. She murmured that perhaps it was no wonder something that perfect had come to her too easily. The priest called her name gently, telling her that perhaps today's encounter was not mere coincidence but a part of God's will. He quoted a verse, saying that one should keep asking, and it would be given, keep seeking, and it would be found, keep knocking, and the door would be opened. Seoryeong stood silently, listening to his words. As she turned to leave, a flyer in her hand caught her attention. It announced a nationwide top-end service for preserving people's honor and memories. She frowned, her fingers trembling slightly, her mind filled with confusion as she whispered a question to herself. How was she able to see this flyer? After her medical checkup, the doctor appeared deeply concerned. She said it made no logical sense that Seoryeong's vision had returned so suddenly. Such a case, she mentioned, might even need to be reported to the academic community before anything else. Seoryeong sat silently, her thoughts drifting back to the moment her husband vanished. She felt that the fog in her vision had disappeared along with him. She wondered if this was merely coincidence or something far stranger. The doctor admitted, almost fumbling, that in all her years as an ophthalmologist, she had never seen a case like this. Seoryeong had been clearly diagnosed with retinal dysfunction 2.5 years ago, yet somehow, her blindness appeared to have been only temporary. Doctor repeated that this was something worth studying. She speculated that if someone had been periodically stimulating Seoryeong's optic nerve, it might have caused temporary paralysis, an unusual, but not impossible, condition. Seoryeong recalled a moment when her husband had called out to her, reminding her that it was time to apply her eye drops. She had told him that she could do it herself, but he had insisted, saying he simply wanted to take care of her. He said he wanted to do everything for her, and she remembered his voice sounding almost affectionate, almost desperate. That memory now felt tainted, as though it had hidden something she had never noticed. She asked the doctor if her ophthalmologist had changed recently. The doctor paused, apologizing for the delayed explanation. She said that she had taken over Dr. Park's patients, as Dr. Park had accepted an opportunity abroad and started working overseas this semester. Seoryeong nodded quietly but felt a cold realization forming in her chest. It seemed her husband had not disappeared alone. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. Her mind returned to a memory of when her husband had told her that they needed to hang their wedding photo frame in the living room. He had said it would make the house feel more like a home. Seoryeong had smiled back then, teasingly asking what kind of expression he was making in the photo. She had said it would be wonderful if she could see it clearly with her own eyes. He had laughed softly, poking the corner of her lips and saying that both of them were smiling happily, just like this. The warmth in that moment had seemed so genuine, yet now, in hindsight, it felt distant and artificial. Later, Seoryeong called someone who was helping her with the investigation. The person had gone through every possible record and said that the name, the company, and even the car license plate linked to her husband were all fake. Seoryeong confirmed that there were no CCTV cameras in the villa or even in the nearby alley. With the neighbors gone, there were no witnesses at all. Still, she asked if he could find her husband. The person replied that whoever orchestrated this had acted under clear orders, working systematically, and asked Seoryeong to start from the beginning. Everything she remembered about her neighbors. She went on to describe every detail she could recall. She confessed that she wanted to know the truth, not assumptions or fragments of theories, just the truth. She wanted to uncover the exact reason behind everything. Once she knew, she promised herself she would take back the one thing that had truly belonged to her. She could not and will not let go like this. A few days later, Seoryeong went to the Angel Detective Agency. There, she met a man and a young woman. She asked them if they had found anything about her husband. The woman glared at her for a moment, then suddenly shouted, asking how Seoryeong had been living like this all this time. Her words startled Seoryeong. The woman cursed under her breath, calling her husband a vile scoundrel so wretched that even using his tongue as a fly swatter wouldn't be punishment enough. The detective beside her called out her name, Chana, and told her to calm down and mind her language. Introducing himself as Young Pil-gyu, stepping forward. He said he was the team leader of the Information Analysis Unit at Blast Company. He explained that their company Blast Corp was a private military corporation, a government-approved organization that provided defense and intelligence services in overseas conflict zones. The small detective office they were in was just one of their minor operations. Young Pil said they should skip formalities as time was valuable. He then turned to Seoryeong and apologized, saying that they couldn't take her case as she had requested. Shocked, Seoryeong asked about the reason. Before Young Pil could answer, Chana interjected angrily, saying that most of the neighbors Seoryeong mentioned had used fake names. The schools and workplaces she listed were all false as well. Seoryeong was taken aback, unable to believe what she was hearing. Chana continued, saying that the man Seoryeong had married had made one critical mistake. She reminded Seoryeong that she had said the man next door owned a dog. Even if everything else was fabricated, the dog's name was probably real. They had looked it up through veterinary records, and the registered owner turned out to be a 67-year-old woman. Seoryeong frowned in disbelief, saying that couldn't be right. She insisted the owner was a young man, not an elderly woman. Chana shrugged, saying that was exactly why they had dug deeper. They had pulled 5 years' worth of credit card receipts from the woman Kim Yeonmi, and what they found was unexpected. She handed Seoryeong a tablet screen. Seoryeong apologized softly, explaining that her vision still hadn't fully adjusted, so she couldn't see it clearly. Chana realized her mistake, apologized for her tone, and explained that the record showed purchases from a bookstore, specifically National Intelligence Service Grade 9 exam books, both basic and applied editions. Seoryeong froze at the mention of the National Intelligence Service. Young Pil spoke next, saying that Kim Yeonmi had a son who supposedly worked at a publishing company. He explained that field agents often use such professions as cover identities. If the son had passed the NICE examination and infiltrated Seoryeong's neighborhood disguised as an ordinary worker, then everything began to make sense. Seoryeong interrupted, saying she didn't understand what any of this meant. Young Pil's expression darkened as he asked what kind of person her husband really was. He said that whoever he was, he had managed to turn a woman completely insane and then vanish without a trace. He reminded her that this man had bought an entire villa, manipulated everything within a 200-meter radius, and disappeared flawlessly. This level of execution, Young Pil said, wasn't something any ordinary operative or low-level mission could pull off. He explained that for a woman like her, a National Intelligence Service black agent might have been assigned. Black agents, he said, were completely off-record, ghosts within the system. Their identities were known only to the highest-ranking officials, and their expertise lay in erasing their traces entirely. Their faces, their names, and even their past were things no one could uncover. He looked at her solemnly, saying that if what they suspected was true, then she might never find her husband again. While in another place, Kim Hyun removed his mask. The other person on the microphone remarked that it was disgusting no matter how many times he saw it, saying it wasn't anything like a snake shedding its skin. He still couldn't believe it, even after witnessing it several times. Won Cheng, from the NIS Foreign National Interest Intelligence Division Field Support Team, a skilled hacker, called out to the team leader, asking if he had managed to escape safely. Kim Hyun confirmed that he had bolted without looking back, terrified he might get caught, revealing himself as Lee Wushin from the NIS Foreign National Interest Intelligence Division Unofficial Team 1. Codename Maka.Won Cheng reported that he had used a silicon mask and even a voice-altering chip, stating that ever since he began supporting him, he had lost all trust in people. He added that his acting skills were so convincing that for a brief moment, he had genuinely thought he had fallen in love. Lee Wushin addressed him mockingly, calling him his dear Won Cheng, and commented on how long his tongue had gotten. Wan Chang tried to excuse himself, his voice trembling as chills ran down his spine. He mentioned the owl, their target, saying she had seemed to truly love him. About a month earlier, the local precinct had fallen into chaos when she showed up covered in blood, claiming it was her husband's. Wan Chang suddenly heard a sound from outside and called out to the team leader. When Li Wuxin questioned him about the blood, Wan Chang explained that it turned out to be her own. She had cut her hand while cooking or something similar. He said the missing person report had been processed unusually fast, leading to the quick exposure of the fake identity. The owl had turned out to be sharper than expected, as she had even managed to secure CCTV footage. Li Wuxin, sounding annoyed, told Wan Chang to explain in 3 seconds why he should ruin his mood by watching that footage. He asked if Wan Chang really believed what he did had been an actual marriage. The owl had been only a target, and his assigned role had simply been that of a husband. The mission, which had once seemed hopeless, had finally ended, so there was no reason to revisit such a tiresome memory. He instructed Wan Chang not to look back or dwell on it again. As Li Wuxin's thoughts briefly drifted to the past, Wan Chang apologized, saying that after 2 years of surveillance, he had developed the habit unconsciously. Li Wuxin asked if he was still fixated on the fact that he had done such a thing with an ordinary civilian, clearly disgusted by him. Li Wuxin then asked if there was any place that trained black agents without involving emotions, telling Wan Chang to inform him about one if it existed. Li Wuxin clearly stated that he would personally take him to such a school if he had to. Li Wuxin commented sarcastically that Wan Chang was so conscientious, calling him a pure little sprout that needed to grow up properly. Wan Chang, his ears almost bleeding from tension, hurried to deny any misunderstanding and promised to correct himself immediately. Li Wuxin told him that if he truly understood, he should never mention the owl again. Wan Chang quickly agreed and asked if Li Wuxin was really submitting his resignation. Before he could say more, Li Wuxin ended the call. Wan Chang sat there, realizing that the team leader seemed genuinely upset. As the line went dead, he muttered that he hoped their cold-hearted team leader would forget her soon. The scene then shifted to Seoryeong, who appeared deep in thought. Chana looked at her in disbelief as she said something that left her stunned. She asked if she was saying she wanted to defect, but she immediately denied it, explaining that she wasn't talking about defecting but about going to the north. Chana's confusion grew, and she clarified with a faint smile that she meant not southward, but northward to North Korea. Hearing this, Chana was alarmed. Seoryeong explained that she had figured if she truly wanted to take on a black agent from Ness, she needed to elevate her game to the level of international crime. She mentioned doing reconnaissance around Paju Bridge and the Imjin River. Since she was from the North China region, she thought it would be wise to get some advice from her old connections there, which was why she had reached out to her. Chana called her insane, asking if she seriously wanted to get involved with the Ness. Seoryeong affirmed it calmly, saying that people claimed she was someone who could never be tailed. Because of that, she thought of trying the opposite approach. If she wagged her tail enough and committed bad deeds, she might get caught by NES. That way, she would get a chance to meet active agents directly. Chana stared at her, stunned, as she spoke with unwavering determination. Her eyes carried a cold resolve as she said she was serious about it. She made it clear she wasn't joking or planning aimlessly. She had already mapped out her approach carefully. To her, this wasn't a reckless act, but a calculated decision driven by something stronger than reason. Seoryeong's expression hardened when she said she wanted to meet him again, no matter what it took. She declared that he would be the one to come and catch her. A few days later, as Seoryeong drove toward the border, the soldier at the post yawned lazily, saying his condition was terrible that day. He stretched his arms, complaining while yawning continuously, when suddenly a car approached them at top speed. Seoryeong, gripping the steering wheel tightly, recalled Chana's words warning her that if she ever got caught and met her husband again, what would she do? She muttered under her breath that she didn't know. Should she kill him or love him more? She didn't know what she wanted anymore. Part of her longed to see him, and another part wanted to kill him. Should she kill him or love him more? She didn't know what she wanted anymore. Part of her longed to see him, and another part wanted to kill him. Each day had become miserable for her as she drank her bitter coffee, trying to wash away the thoughts that kept haunting her. In the present, as Seoryeong accelerated further, her car roared toward the checkpoint while the soldiers screamed for her to stop. They hurriedly placed barricades, trying to halt her movement. Seoryeong bit her lip hard, whispering that she had to hurry and catch him soon. She yelled through the window, telling the soldiers to catch her quickly as she evaded all the blockades, thinking this much would do. The tension around her felt heavier with each passing second as the sound of the engine echoed through the quiet post. As Seoryeong drove through the path, she heard the voices of soldiers running behind her. One of them collapsed, gasping that he couldn't breathe. Another soldier rushed to help him, asking what was wrong and trying to help him catch his breath. Seoryeong's eyes widened in disbelief as she cursed aloud, wondering why they weren't catching her, because at this rate she would end up in North Korea. She gritted her teeth, twisting the steering wheel sharply to avoid a near collision, her heart pounding as she tried to steady her breath. The soldiers kept shouting, warning her to pull over and surrender. As they finally caught up, one of them reached for the door, saying she was under emergency arrest. Seoryeong sighed deeply, saying they were too late since she truly thought she would die in the process. The soldiers exchanged confused looks before escorting her into custody. Inside the office, an official stepped forward, stating he was from the National Intelligence Service Anti-Communist Investigation Division. He told her that she was being charged with violating the National Security Act and damaging military facilities. Hearing his tone, Seoryeong gave a faint smile, the kind that made others uneasy. The official continued, saying that because of her actions, all nearby facilities would remain closed until the investigation was fully completed. He mentioned it was a well-known tourist spot, and due to her recklessness, all group schedules had been cancelled. Seoryeong interrupted him suddenly, asking if that wasn't a good thing since she had heard about a soldier collapsing from hyperventilation, and wasn't it better for him to rest comfortably in the hospital? Her words left the official staring at her with visible irritation, calling her thoughtless. He explained that even attempted violations of the National Security Act were punishable, and that everything she said could affect whether charges would be filed against her. He questioned her motive for trying to defect to North Korea, then paused to rephrase his question more carefully. He asked who Kim Hyun was, as during her police interrogation she had only mentioned his name and refused to say more. He pressed her to explain who exactly he was. Seoryeong replied calmly that he was her husband. The official frowned, saying the records listed her as single. She pointed out that she had lived with a man in a de facto marriage for 2 years and that the man she claimed had disappeared recently was the same person. The official leaned closer, asking if her motive for violating the law was connected to that man. Seoryeong stayed silent for a moment, then answered that the chairman of the National Defense Commission of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Supreme Commander of the Korean People's Army, and the Great Leader of the People, those were the titles her husband often mentioned. Her statement startled the officials, leaving them exchanging uneasy glances. Seoryeong explained that at first she had thought of reporting him as a spy, but she didn't even know his real name or what he truly looked like. She let out a tired breath and said it seemed she had unknowingly built a life with a spy. With a faint sarcastic smile, she asked the official if he could kindly investigate the matter for her, since she had no idea who she had really lived. Seoryeong stated further that several motives pointed to the missing Kim Hyun, and if they allowed him to disappear like this, it would cause serious trouble. She said no one could predict what kind of harm he might bring to the country. She insisted the government needed to step in and bring him back, asking if they did not think the same. Suddenly, the official's phone rang, and he attended to the call, giving short affirmations. Seoryeong's gaze shifted toward him as she observed his movements carefully, noticing how calmly he behaved despite her claims. After ending the call, the official moved his chair slightly and said that this much should be enough for the investigation. His words startled Seoryeong. He continued, saying her attempted defection would likely be written off under diminished responsibility, but she would still face a fine of around 10 million won for damaging military property. Seoryeong shouted, claiming she was telling him her husband was a spy, and investigating further was the right thing to do. The official ignored her protest and thanked her for cooperating in the investigation. Seoryeong's voice rose sharply as she screamed, asking what the hell he meant by that. She demanded to know if people even knew who Kim Hyun was. She questioned why everyone seemed so determined to cover up his existence. She asked if the people in charge of catching spies should really be this careless, telling them to step out before she smashed that document in front of her. Her tone grew more aggressive as she glared at the glass wall, saying if they were playing hide and seek, they should at least play together. The official warned her to stop playing games, but Seoryeong shouted that they were the ones playing games. She demanded to know what was so special about Kim Hyun that they refused to conduct a proper investigation. She kept shouting, asking why they were hiding him, repeating her question as her breath grew heavy. The room filled with silence for a moment until the official calmly asked if she was taking her medication properly. Seoryeong froze, confused by his question. The official explained that she had been off her medication for quite some time and that this was probably when her husband's disappearance began. Seoryeong frowned and questioned him about the medication, insisting she wasn't sick, so there was no reason for her to take any. The official replied that he had just checked with her doctor about her condition. Seoryeong's expression shifted as she thought about her doctor and reached for the report in front of her. The detective standing beside the official mentioned that Haneum Hospital, her hospital, was the one she had been visiting since childhood. The scene shifted to the hospital, where Dr. Park sat in his office, listening to the news on television. The reporter announced that a woman in her 20s had been caught earlier that morning while attempting to defect to North Korea through the border area of Paju. According to the police, the woman was identified only as Miss Han, but suddenly, the reporter's announcement was interrupted when the office door opened, startling Dr. Park. Seoryeong entered quietly, smiling, as she announced that she was there. She calmly poured tea for the doctor as if it were an ordinary visit, while he stared at her, his hands trembling slightly. Dr. Park asked nervously what had happened to her eyes. Seoryeong replied that they were healing and that, thankfully, it wasn't incurable after all. She chuckled faintly, saying it was funny, wasn't it? Dr. Park, trying to stay composed, nodded and mentioned that she had been doing well, saying that was positive news. He asked if she was still getting along with her husband. Seoryeong tilted her head and replied that he had run away, of course. She said she behaved exactly as he taught her, nicely, obedient like a puppy, playful and charming. Yet he still left her behind. She added that he knew how hard she tried to live virtuously. She quit gymnastics, got expelled from high school, and yet still worked hard to live an honest life, even as a caregiver. Despite everything, this was where she had ended up. The doctor, visibly nervous, sipped the tea she poured. His throat moved stiffly as he tried to swallow, his eyes flickering toward her. Seoryeong leaned forward slightly, her expression empty yet oddly calm, and asked what wrong she could have possibly done. She questioned why people abandoned those they gave life to, why they ran from those they loved, and why they betrayed those they cherished. Her voice trembled slightly as she called out to the doctor, asking why he did what he did. The doctor froze, with the teacup shaking in his hands. As Dr. Park tried to understand what she meant, unable to grasp her words, Seoryeong warned him, asking if he knew how. In the old days, the mafia punished traitors by mixing poison into their tea. The remark froze Dr. Park in fear as he swallowed his tea nervously. Suddenly, he began to cough violently and collapsed onto the floor. Seoryeong called out to him, saying she had turned him into a schizophrenia patient, demanding to know who made him do it. Dr. Park stammered that he truly had no idea, but Seoryeong said she suspected her husband's involvement. She kicked him, forcing him back, saying she needed to uncover more about it. Apologetically, she said that when it came to her husband, she lost control. Dr. Park weakly explained that he had only followed instructions, as they assured him it would not harm her. Seoryeong took a step back, realizing something. She picked up the cup and drank the tea herself. Then she turned to Dr. Park, asking who those people were. He said they claimed to be from a government agency, later handing him a business card from a publishing house, saying they were publishing staff. Seoryeong recalled Young-pil's words regarding the dog's owner working for a publishing company. She reflected on how field agents often hid behind such professions. Yet, the more she searched for him, the more her quiet denial began to crumble. The lies he had woven were always there, so clear, yet she had been blind to them. She realized how foolish she had been. Calling out to Dr. Park, she said he had taught her to wear a mask of kindness, and that this would be their final session. Dr. Park asked what she meant, to which she replied that she intended to break that mask. She thought she had wanted to live kindly and be loved, but everything around her was an illusion. Even her marriage, which she once believed was the happiest moment of her life, had been nothing more than a cruel deception. If there was no trace of truth in her life, then all that remained was her bare, pitiful self as she bid farewell to Dr. Park. Later, when she returned home, she searched through the house and scattered Lee Woo-shin's clothes across her bed. As she wrapped herself in them, she called out his name. She called for him again, closing her eyes, recalling his words and his voice echoing in her head. His tone filled her mind, saying that he was changing his clothes. Then the scene shifted to a restaurant, where Seoryeong opened her eyes to see Chana searching for her. Chana flinched and asked if she had been shot while defecting. Seoryeong shook her head, saying it was not her body but her bank account that got hit. She had been fined 10 million won, which made Chana slap her own head in disbelief. She questioned Seoryeong, asking if she had called her out again for the same reason. Seoryeong did not answer directly, saying she had no connections in that field. She muttered that she might kidnap someone to hold as a hostage. Chana stared at her, shocked by the absurdity of her thought. Seoryeong continued, saying the higher the hostage's social status, the better, since that would force the government to send a negotiation expert. She suggested that someone like the deputy director of the National Intelligence Service would make the perfect hostage. The scene shifted again to Lee Woo-shin, who suddenly received a call from the deputy. He cursed under his breath, regretting not having destroyed his phone earlier, and continued cursing as he realized the trouble about to unfold. The deputy director ordered Lee Woo-shin to return immediately, but Lee Woo-shin replied that he had only submitted his resignation letter regarding the issue. The deputy director shouted furiously, asking if he thought raising an agent like him was easy. Even with 10 years of service, now 2 intelligence agents were dead, and in such a situation he dared to hand in a resignation letter with careless personal reasons. Lee Woo-shin stated calmly that he had already explained everything in the letter, that he was suffering from schizophrenia. The deputy director roared, asking if that was his explanation, questioning what kind of mental state he believed he was in. Lee Woo-shin asked if the deputy director really thought he had been truly sane until now. The director demanded to know what was bothering him so much, reminding him that he once said he would quit as soon as the mission ended. Lee Woo-shin repeated that he had schizophrenia. Even during his personal hours, it had become unbearable to show his face without wearing a silicone mask. He had assumed it was a work-related condition, but the hospital diagnosed it as obsessive-compulsive disorder. He felt as though he would rip his own face off if it continued. No more faceless ghost haunting him every night. He went on, saying he could not engage in espionage anymore, as he had a tattoo next to his private part. The deputy director was taken aback. Lee Woo-shin continued, saying that now, like in the current mission, he could neither talk about it nor use it. So what was he supposed to do? The deputy director slammed his desk in anger, calling him insane and asking what he was doing to the nation's property. He cursed repeatedly, accusing him of losing his mind. He then asked if Li Wuxin truly believed he was resisting because he had made. Before finishing his sentence, Li Wuxin cut him off, saying that it was enough. If the deputy director was not going to return his resignation, then he should end it there. The deputy director called after him, asking if he no longer needed the document, saying he thought he had endured everything so far just for that paper. He demanded to know if Li Wuxin was really giving up like this. Li Wuxin replied that he had not given up. He said he was simply the one who had grown tired first after 10 years. Even though he had cared for the owl, he had failed. He had gained nothing from it. With nowhere to release his frustration, he just wanted to find a way to deal with it. He asked if that was truly what irritated the deputy director so much. The deputy director fell silent for a moment before stating that he was just one step away from becoming the director of the National Intelligence Service. Once he reached that position, he promised he could give Li Wuxin what he wanted. This time, he would ensure that Li Wuxin's real face and name would be used, as he was currently the one within the quota. That was the kind of mask he needed now, so he pleaded with Li Wuxin to do it just one last time. Li Wuxin, taking a pause, asked if it was without the mask. The deputy director affirmed. After pausing briefly, Li Wuxin asked what the mission was. The deputy director asked if he had ever heard of Blast Corporation. The scene then shifted to Seoryeong, who heard about the same corporation. Chana explained to her that if she wanted to kidnap someone as important as a deputy director or a section chief of the National Intelligence Service, she first needed basic combat and operational skills. Chana insisted that she learn them, mentioning that most of the professionals were affiliated with her company. Seoryeong asked if it was truly necessary to learn such skills, leaving Chana stunned. Chana shouted that the NIS executives were probably always surrounded by bodyguards, and to execute a kidnapping without being detected, one required proper training. She said she genuinely felt like Seoryeong was her younger sister from North Korea, and that she was giving her this advice out of care. While Chana continued speaking, Seoryeong's thoughts drifted toward the Blast Corporation. Chana's voice echoed, suggesting that there were plenty of men working in Blast. If Seoryeong spent time with those male comrades, she might eventually forget about that jerk and rediscover a sense of freedom. Chana seemed to be having her own illusions about Seoryeong, while Seoryeong quietly sensed that Chana's thoughts were somewhat misplaced. Still, what Chana said made sense. To take an NIS higher up as a hostage, she indeed needed stamina, training, and proper skill. She also realized she would probably need an accomplice to carry out the abduction. If everything went well, she could even turn the situation to her advantage. Seoryeong then called out to Chana, mentioning the man they had met at the private detective agency, Young Peel. She reminded Chana that he had said he was the team leader of the Blast Corporation. Chana confirmed it, asking why she brought it up, wondering aloud about her brother-in-law. Hearing this, Seoryeong froze for a moment before smiling faintly at Chana. She said softly that the two of them were family, acknowledging the truth behind their connection. After the meeting, Seoryeong went out to meet Young Peel, who questioned what exactly there was to talk about. She mentioned Chana, explaining that she had heard he was part of her family and that he was her brother-in-law. She clarified that this made them brother-in-law and sister-in-law and that she had contacted him only to warn him he might be in danger. She then played a recording of Chana's voice, in which she spoke to Seoryeong about what would happen if they were ever caught and had to face her husband. Seoryeong told Young Peel that she had once tried to defect to the north but had been caught, and that it was Chana who had told her how to do it, deliberately giving her that method to make Young Peel despair. She added that if she were caught again while attempting to defect, she might be forced to mention Chana's name, claiming that the defector Chana had helped her. Young Peel shouted in anger, but Seoryeong ignored him. She stated coldly that the older brother-in-law turned out to be a former employee of the National Intelligence Service. Young Peel demanded to know what she was trying to do at that moment, and Seoryeong replied that he seemed to possess an unexpectedly pure heart, asking if he had ever planned to marry while taking care of defector sisters, teasingly questioning whether he had abandoned that idea. Young Peel raised his voice again, but she remained calm and detached. Seoryeong then said that if Chana came under suspicion, his wife would inevitably be implicated too. Young Peel paused, controlling his temper, and asked what exactly she wanted from him. Seoryeong answered simply that she wanted a job. She explained that she had been looking into a company called Blast Corporation, a subsidiary of Manhwa Group, which ranked third in national corporate listings. It was a private military company known for its wide range of clients: nations in conflict, authoritarian regimes, drug cartels, legitimate governments, and even relief organizations. It had earned the reputation of being the most versatile private military contractor in East Asia. Apart from combat operations, it provided strategic, logistical, and technical services, and its contracts often reach hundreds of billions in wartime funding. Seoryeong added that Blast Corp also supplied VIP protection within the country and was frequently used by the National Intelligence Service whenever they lacked manpower for critical missions. Young Peel asked why she was investigating the company, and Seoryeong reminded him that she had already said she needed employment. Young-pil grumbled that Blast Corp hired only those with specific military or intelligence backgrounds, former Ministry of Defense officers, ex-NES agents, special operatives, and retired soldiers. He questioned whether Seoryeong possessed any such qualifications. Seoryeong replied with a faint smile and a single word: kill. Hearing this, Young-pil was shocked, pleading with her not to go that far, insisting that even her defection attempt had already crossed the line. Seoryeong corrected him quietly, saying that it was not murder but simply housekeeping. A few days later, Seoryeong received a call from Blast Corporation requesting her to attend an interview. During the session, the interviewer mentioned that her reference was Young-pil, the head of the information team, and that the interview was merely procedural. He said her job would include laundry, cooking, and dishwashing, and that she would officially start on Monday. He added that it was rare for a young woman to join such a workplace, and that her arrival would motivate the team to train harder. Seoryeong noticed that most of the staff appeared to be soldiers, so she remarked that there must be many dangerous tools on site. The interviewer laughed mockingly, asking if she was scared, saying there would be many older brothers to protect her once she began working. Seoryeong replied that it was not fear, but that he should learn to keep his mouth shut. Her tone caused the interviewer to flinch. She looked around the room and remarked that there were weapons everywhere, asking whether he was not the one who should actually be afraid. When the interview ended, Seoryeong walked outside, her steps steady and expression unreadable. She thought to herself that the road ahead was already long enough. As she stepped out into the busy street, her phone rang. She answered it as a man brushed past her. On the other side, Chana answered. While Seoryeong replied that she had just come out of the interview and asked if she was already at the company, the man who had walked past her at that very moment was none other than Lee Woo-shin. A month later, while Seoryeong continued performing her daily duties, one of the keepers called out to her, asking her to come over for lunch, since every table except one had already been cleared. Seoryeong replied that she would come after disposing of the remaining leftovers, to which the keeper told her to hurry up and eat. Seoryeong acknowledged briefly and resumed her work. As she moved about cleaning, faint whispers spread among the workers. They spoke about an opening in the special security team, their voices filled with curiosity and caution. Some muttered that rumors had already started circulating about the new team leader, describing him as a complete tyrant. They said that even though he was exceptionally skilled, the team members under him were being pushed beyond their limits, nearly breaking under his leadership. Seoryeong paused for a moment, quietly processing what she heard. The whispers made her recall the last time she had seen Chana. The memory came with a dull ache, a faint recollection of Chana pulling her into a brief, awkward hug. Seoryeong remembered feeling drained, the exhaustion of pretending to be fine weighing down on her. Chana had asked how her work was going and whether she was getting along with her colleagues. Chana remarked that with that teasing tone of hers and her sharp face and cold attitude, she probably already had everything under control. Seoryeong had brushed her hand away, asking instead where she was working these days. She mentioned that it was harder to see him than she had expected. Chana had hesitated, almost flinching at her question, replying vaguely that all she could say was that the new team leader was a real bastard. That conversation echoed in her mind now. The thought crossed her mind that Chana might also be part of the special security team, since it was the only division she had never been able to find any information about. Everything related to that unit was heavily restricted, almost as if its activities had been deliberately erased from the company's records. As Seoryeong continued, she sensed tension rising among some employees nearby. Two of them were arguing heatedly. One suddenly grabbed the other by the collar, cursing and daring him to repeat what he had just said. The other shouted back, accusing him of pretending not to care whenever the special security team was mentioned, when in truth, he desperately wanted to join them. He accused him of acting superior while secretly envying those selected. The man with the collar clenched in his hand yelled again, demanding to know who the other thought he was calling jealous. He shouted that the other always acted like he was the only one clean in the group, as if talking big was enough to earn respect. The argument escalated, voices growing louder and angrier, until Seoryeong realized they were on the verge of losing control. The two men shoved each other violently, and in the chaos they stumbled toward the keeper standing nearby. The older woman tried to back away, but one of the men crashed into her. She fell to the floor with a sharp cry of pain. The room froze for a brief second before panic set in. The keeper whispered that her back looked seriously hurt and asked what they should do. Seeing this, Seoryeong couldn't hold herself. She took a breath and said calmly that she would handle the cleanup. As she stepped forward, one of the men sneered at her, asking who she thought she was to interfere. Seoryeong gave no reply. Instead, she pushed the trolley forward with sudden force, tipping the wheel and flinging the contents of the food bucket straight toward him. The man stumbled back in shock, his clothes drenched. His eyes widened with fury as he shouted, demanding what she thought she was doing. Seoryeong met his glare with an unreadable expression and said simply that lunch break was over and he could leave. Later that day, Seoryeong was summoned by her superior. The man threw a towel to her, his tone sharp as he told her that she had been hired to clean up messes, not to create them. He said he had known from the beginning that she was bold and had no sense of restraint, but this time she had crossed the line. He reminded her that this company revolved around combat personnel and that their job as support staff was to maintain order, not disrupt it. Before he could continue, Seoryeong interrupted quietly, suggesting that someone should check on Miss Kim's back. The supervisor frowned, insisting that she did not understand what was important at that moment. He warned her that one of the men she had clashed with earlier was notoriously hot-headed and now extremely angry. He advised her to avoid provoking him for a while if she valued her position. Seoryeong said nothing further and left the office. As she walked down the corridor, she thought grimly about how she was supposed to continue her mission, to kidnap the division head and find her husband, when every step seemed to draw her deeper into complications. She wondered whether she needed to devise a new plan, but she also realized that no other workplace would provide her the access or cover this one did. The elevator doors opened as she reached the lobby. Standing inside was Lee Woo-shin, accompanied by an official. Seoryeong hesitated briefly, unsure whether to enter. Lee Woo-shin glanced at her and said evenly that she might as well get in. The space between them felt heavy with unspoken tension. Seoryeong remained still, offering no reply. Lee Woo-shin looked at her again and remarked that if she wasn't getting on, she should at least move aside. He pressed the button and the doors began to close. As the metal panels slid together, Seoryeong glanced at him for a moment before the elevator closed. As the elevator door closed, Seoryeong remarked that it was quite an interesting look. She overheard other employees talking, saying he was the new guy everyone had been discussing. One of them mentioned hearing that he had spent a long time in Africa. They said he enlisted in the military as soon as he became an adult and had been working in the special forces ever since. Another expressed surprise, questioning if he was really 31 and what kind of experience he had. Seoryeong recalled that he was the one from the rumors, the so-called bastard team leader everyone talked about. Seoryeong later met the thug-like man who threw his clothes at her and ordered her to wash them again. He complained that they still smelled like food waste and that it had been a week, yet the smell would not go away. Seoryeong explained that she had already washed them more than 20 times in the past week and found it strange that the odor still lingered. Suddenly, the man asked if she even knew his name. Seoryeong replied that it was written on his training uniform and that she could read Hangul. Sung-wook appeared surprised and asked if she was always this stiff. He cursed at her, telling her not to stare and warning that her eyes were freaking him out. Hearing this, Seoryeong asked if he wanted to sleep with her or something, leaving him completely stunned. Sung-wook questioned what kind of person she was and whether she even understood what being subtle meant. Seoryeong asked if he was acting that way because he wanted to sleep with her. Sung-wook paused before asking what she would do if he said yes. He asked that if he did, would she actually go for it as he stepped closer? Seoryeong denied it, saying she did not sleep with just anyone. She added that one had to be at least only 8 centimeters tall, weigh under 80 kilograms, wear a woody-scented cologne, and have an upward curving anatomy, which clearly annoyed Sung-wook. Seoryeong went on to say that it had to curve upward because her husband was like that. The thug grew embarrassed and cursed loudly, shouting that she was telling him only now that she was married. He demanded to know what she was glaring at and told her he thought he had left his dog tag in the shower, ordering her to go look for it. Seoryeong went to do as told. Suddenly, he called after her, asking if she really had a husband. Seoryeong thought seriously about what kind of nonsense that was and ignored him as she approached the bathroom. While continuing her work, she thought crossing the border 100 times would have been easier than this. As she moved closer, she heard some voices and wondered if someone was inside bathing. Inside, Lee Woo-shin was washing himself. He suddenly noticed her and asked what was going on, questioning if she was trying to take a shower with him. Seoryeong froze, wondering when he had even come in. Lee Woo-shin told her that the others would be there soon and that she needed to get out quickly. Seoryeong's gaze suddenly dropped downward. Lee Woo-shin looked surprised and said she was being too obvious and making him feel awkward. Seoryeong noticed a tattoo there and was taken aback to see it. Lee Woo-shin told her that if she was done looking, she should just leave. However, when he met her eyes, he froze. Without hesitation, he reached out and pulled off her mask, making Seoryeong scream and ask what he was doing. When Lee Woo-shin saw her face, he stood still, trembling as he questioned what she was doing there. Seoryeong apologized, saying she thought no one was inside and that she would leave right away. Suddenly, Lee Woo-shin heard other people entering for a shower, complaining about how tired they were. One of them questioned what the smell was, asking if someone's feet stank or if someone had stepped in poop and come there. Lee Woo-shin quickly closed the door while the others continued talking, saying they had heard Sung-wook had caused trouble with the maid again and that the guy really seemed to have an attitude problem. Seoryeong told Lee Woo-shin to move, but he asked her to wait and let him think for a moment. When Seoryeong told Lee Woo-shin to move, but he asked her to wait and let him think for a moment. When Seoryeong questioned what there was to think about, Lee Woo-shin asked what she was even doing there. She explained that someone had said they left their ID tag in the shower room. Lee Woo-shin denied that being his real concern and asked what she did in the company. Seoryeong replied that she cooked and did laundry, which left Lee Woo-shin surprised. Seoryeong added that unnecessary courtesy was not needed right now, and seeing his naked teammates was not going to kill her. She thought the whole situation was more unpleasant for her than for him and shoved his hand away. Taking a moment, Lee Woo-shin asked if staring at people like that was her habit. Seoryeong looked down, caught sight of his thing, and smacked him in shock, muttering what a pity it was. Suddenly, Lee Woo-shin turned on the shower while Seoryeong ran away from the door. Lee Woo-shin glanced at her, wondering why she had to make direct eye contact with him in that way. Later, Lee Woo-shin called out for Wan Cheng. Wan Cheng responded, asking if Lee Woo-shin had called for him and whether he had found anything about Blast Corp. Lee Woo-shin questioned why the owl was there, which made Wan Cheng confused. Lee Woo-shin asked what the hell he was doing, to which Wan Cheng asked if that really was their owl. Lee Woo-shin grew annoyed by his words and questioned if Wan Cheng found something or not. Wan Cheng replied that he did and began explaining. Wan Cheng said that Seoryeong was 27 years old. She had joined the corporation a month ago and was assigned to the logistics department, where she mostly worked in the kitchen and laundry room. Wan Cheng asked if Lee Woo-shin had met her before. Lee Woo-shin replied that she probably had not recognized him. He explained that it was not like he had been wearing the Kim Hyun mask at that time, and his voice sounded different since it was not hoarse back then. Wan Cheng then asked if her face looked very worn out. Lee Woo-shin asked if that was really what Wan Cheng was curious about. Wan Cheng denied it, saying it was not that. He mentioned he had been told not to report anything about the owl, so he had not mentioned it earlier. He revealed that the owl had been caught recently trying to defect to North Korea. Lee Woo-shin was shocked to hear that and asked if she really did so. Wan Cheng continued, explaining that she had framed Kim Hyun as a spy. When she tried to defect, she had also demanded that Kim Hyun be investigated. In the end, she was not punished for the defection attempt. Hearing this, Lee Woo-shin was stunned. He thought to himself about the Seoryeong he knew, a lonely yet kind woman, someone who had lived a quiet, uneventful life without complaints, a person who was good-natured, obedient, and gentler than anyone else. He could not believe she had done that. Lee Woo-shin muttered that the owl was not the kind of woman who would ever do such a thing, but Wan Cheng disagreed. He said that ever since her husband had disappeared, she had been struggling to cope. He added that it was fortunate she did not recognize many people around her. He explained that the owl would not be interested in anyone other than Kim Hyun. Lee Woo-shin then ordered him to keep a close watch on her. He told him to find out what she was thinking, what her current mental state was, and how she was handling her husband's situation. Everything, without missing a single detail. Wan Cheng affirmed that he understood and would take care of it. Lee Woo-shin thought quietly that it would be best to get rid of her as soon as possible. The scene shifted towards Seoryeong, who was busy with her chores in the kitchen. As she worked, her thoughts drifted back to Lee Woo-shin's words, him asking if it was a habit of hers to stare at people like that. The memory made her frown in embarrassment. She thought about the scars, realizing she had never even properly looked at her husband's thing. Yet the first thing she saw when her eyesight came back was that. The thought alone sent a shiver down her spine. She sighed, thinking how ridiculous it was. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that pervert's was oddly bent. It wasn't straight, it was curved. The image made her recall a conversation she once had with her husband. Back then, she had hesitantly asked her husband if his thing was curved. He had laughed awkwardly, telling her it was a complex of his, shaped a bit differently from others, and that it embarrassed him. Her cheeks flushed red at the memory. Just then, one of the maids called her name, snapping her back to the present. Seoryeong turned, her face still warm with embarrassment. The keeper asked if she could deliver the large lunchboxes to the construction site since the employees were working out there. Seoryeong nodded, still dazed, wondering to herself how everything suddenly felt so strange. As she prepared the boxes, she found her mind wandering again, thinking that the new guy, that man, was too different from her husband. After some time, Seoryeong went out to deliver the lunchboxes. Upon reaching the area, one of the staff remarked she was delivering food for the workers. She sighed under her breath, cursing her luck, realizing she would have to face him again of all people. Lee Woo-shin was already there, standing beside a car, glancing at her. He called out to her, telling her to get in quickly since they needed to deliver the meals to the employees on site. Seoryeong reluctantly obeyed, climbing into the vehicle. She sneaked a glance at him as they drove. She thought he looked familiar, especially after their embarrassing encounter in the shower room. He was the same team leader who had supposedly just joined the Special Security Division. She had heard the rumors about him, people calling him the bastard leader. Lee Woo-shin broke the silence, asking how the work had been so far. Seoryeong replied curtly that it was manageable. He nodded and then mentioned that he heard she had been recommended by team leader Jung-pil. He asked if she had known him beforehand. Seoryeong hesitated, questioning if she was required to answer that. Lee Woo-shin's voice grew more firm as he said he was stepping on the brakes right now and that it would be better for her to answer. He explained that a lady who was supposed to join their overseas business trip had injured her back and was hospitalized, and they were looking to fill that gap. The more sincere she was with her answers, the better her situation would be. He added that he would appreciate her cooperation if she understood what he meant. Seoryeong frowned, thinking bitterly if he was threatening to take her along on the trip if she didn't answer properly. He commented that she was slow to respond, which only irritated her further. Finally, she replied, saying she and Young Pil knew each other a bit personally. Lee Woo-shin raised an eyebrow, questioning that for someone she personally knew. Young Pil happened to be a married man with a wife and kids. He asked if married men were her type. Seoryeong flinched, glaring at him in disbelief before shouting about what kind of thoughts he was having. Lee Woo-shin smirked slightly, saying if she kept her answers brief, his thoughts would follow suit, and perhaps he should shorten them even more. Seoryeong gritted her teeth in frustration and clarified that she knew someone who happened to be Young Pil's sister-in-law rather than Young Pil himself. Lee Woo-shin's tone shifted slightly as he asked if she meant Chana, to which Seoryeong confirmed it. Lee Woo-shin remarked that he was aware Chana was a highly skilled hacker. Seoryeong was taken aback hearing that, surprised to know Chana was a hacker. Lee Woo-shin continued, explaining that in 2016, the Bangladesh Central Bank had almost suffered a loss of $1 billion due to a hacking incident. Behind it was the North Korean government, and at the center of it was a 16-year-old girl. That girl was Chana. Seoryeong listened to it with quite surprise. Lee Woo-shin asked how she ended up meeting such a valuable talent. Seoryeong responded coldly, asking if she really had to share details about her personal life. Lee Woo-shin leaned slightly forward, stating that it wasn't really a story, she couldn't talk about it unless someone had asked her to illegally dig up someone's private information. Seoryeong flinched subtly at that. He observed her reaction carefully. Then, with a calm but intimidating tone, he said that since she wasn't cooperating willingly, he would lay it out plainly. He reminded her that he was the one who made the list for overseas business trips. For her own good, it was better not to go on those trips, especially with the special security team. People with weaker nerves usually didn't handle it well. He suggested that even if it was unpleasant, she should humor him. Otherwise, she might end up going and having a hellish experience. Seoryeong wondered what he was implying. Was he saying that going on the trip would be dangerous for her? That she'd witness things someone with a weak stomach shouldn't see? His words confused and annoyed her at the same time. Lee Woo-shin continued, saying if she just cooperated properly, he would make sure she was excluded from those trips. Seoryeong clenched her fists, thinking he must be insane. The very reason she joined was for that trip, to face situations dangerous enough to attract the Ennies' attention. That was her goal. Lee Woo-shin's tone grew sharp again as he ordered her to answer him. He emphasized that Chana was a talent even the Ennies failed to recruit, so how on earth did she manage to do it? Seoryeong met his gaze, her expression calm but defiant. Then, with a faint smile, she replied that perhaps Ennies and the others failed to recruit Chana not because she was impossible to reach, but because they were simply incompetent. Hearing what she said, Lee Woo-shin was taken aback, asking if she had really truly lost her entire future. Seoryeong calmly replied that she had lost something even more valuable, as money was not the only thing people could steal and run away with. Lee Woo-shin then questioned if Chana had managed to catch the culprit for her. Seoryeong countered, asking why he was so eager to lend a hand, wondering if he planned to drag that bastard out and beat him to a pulp as part of employee welfare. Lee Woo-shin replied that if things had reached a point where the man needed to be beaten down, then she probably had not caught him yet. He remarked that it was unfortunate and added that she seemed to have been underestimated. Seoryeong said that who knew, as she was still searching, and she had no intention of giving up even if it took months or years. She insisted it was not unfortunate, and it was far too early for anyone's pity. Lee Woo-shin commented that if she could not see she was wasting her time, then it meant she had gotten involved with a very bad person. Seoryeong disagreed, saying she was not the unlucky one, it was the other person who was. In the end, she said, they would meet one way or another. Lee Woo-shin gave a small chuckle, saying that now that he thought about it, he had been late in introducing himself. He told her it was nice to meet her for the first time and introduced himself as Lee Woo-shin, head of the special security team. After that, Seoryeong, clearly irritated by his smug reaction, quickly walked away, muttering how petty he was. As she moved along, she began thinking about the upcoming overseas business trip, wondering how she could get her name on the list. She questioned if she should have been harsher with her words earlier, and thought that if she had handled things more sharply, she might have secured an ally. Suddenly, someone called out to her, saying these were the lunchboxes and asking if she could hand them over. She nodded, and the person took the boxes, and Seoryeong was told to be careful on her way back. As she was about to move away, she suddenly felt something strange, her heart tightening at the familiar scent of Kim Hyun standing nearby. Without realizing it, she began following the man. The worker turned and asked why she was following him. Seoryeong asked if she could watch him eat the food in the lunchbox, saying she was simply curious about his appetite. She promised she would not disturb him and just wanted to see him finish the meal. The worker replied that it was noisy and dangerous inside and said that if she gave him her contact information, he would reach out later. Seoryeong looked at him for a moment, noticing his firm build, though she quickly dismissed the thought and smiled faintly, saying he should just enjoy his lunch. As she walked away, her thoughts became heavy. Each time she confirmed her longing for Kim Hyun, her misery deepened, and her resentment toward him grew stronger. She wanted to kill him. She desperately wanted to. Yet at the same time, she realized she missed him too. Moments later, she came across Lee Woo-shin, who asked what that was about and if she knew the man she had been watching. Seoryeong replied that he had said he would wait in the car. Lee Woo-shin casually said he was not the type to sit still when curious. He admitted that he had gotten confused, wondering whether he was delivering a lunchbox or a person, so he came out to see who she had been staring at so intently. Seoryeong tried to stay composed, silently wishing he would just stop talking. His languid eyes, holding a faint trace of amusement, seemed to tease her every time they met hers. Since Kim Hyun had disappeared, the pressure inside her had unknowingly grown, and now it swelled in an instant, leaving her mind clouded. A storm of inappropriate thoughts surged through her, slicing through her calm like a blade. Seoryeong paused, struggling to steady her voice, then said she had been looking at him because she missed him. She knew it was just a way to release her frustration, but the words escaped before she could stop them. Frustrated, she shouted that she had followed him because she liked his scent, demanding what was wrong with that. As she turned away, she added that it was the kind of smell that could make a person go insane, one that could drive someone to the edge of their senses. Lee Woo-shin was stunned by her words, pausing for a moment as disbelief flickered across his face. He looked at her carefully and asked, half serious, if she had been smoking marijuana. Hearing those words, Seoryeong paused as she gazed at him. She scoffed, saying he should just put her on the business trip list already, since she was done trying to please him. Lee Woo-shin froze at her remark, asking her to wait for a moment. But before he could say more, an egg was thrown at him as the workers crowded up, shouting if the corporation had sent him. They called him useless, questioning why someone like him dared to show his face there, throwing more eggs at him in anger. Suddenly, Seoryeong grabbed Lee Woo-shin and screamed for him to hurry up and start the car. Lee Woo-shin asked if she was seriously smoking marijuana, to which Seoryeong shouted back, asking if that was really important right now. Lee Woo-shin affirmed that it was since he couldn't possibly put a hallucinating addict on the business trip list. Seoryeong screamed that she wasn't smoking marijuana, but Lee Woo-shin countered, saying her eyes were rolling back. Seoryeong yelled at him to just open the door and start the car. Lee Woo-shin retorted, asking if it wasn't marijuana, then what kind of smell had made her act so strange. Seoryeong cursed, saying it was her husband's scent. Seoryeong went through Lee Woo-shin's clothes, asking where the car keys were, saying if he wasn't going, he should move aside. But suddenly, she heard a sound as Lee Woo-shin smashed an egg in her direction, stating it was strange. He asked if it was normal for her to follow a man just because of how he smelled. He questioned her, saying men's scents usually came from cheap cologne, and asked how he could trust a team member who acted like such a pervert. Seoryeong responded firmly, saying it wasn't just any man, it was her husband. Men were common, but her husband was the only one in the world for her. She wasn't a pervert, and her husband's scent wasn't some unpleasant smell, so it wouldn't interfere with her work at all. Lee Woo-shin sighed, saying he understood, then ordered her to pack her bags for the business trip as soon as she returned. A few days later, in Bangkok, Thailand, Seoryeong reached their base. Seoryeong questioned her colleague about what exactly they were doing there. The man explained they were providing security for a drug lord. He reminded her that she had signed a non-disclosure agreement before coming. He added that she might have already guessed it was shady work. Their client had earned around 80 billion from drug trafficking, roughly 10 trillion in their currency, and was currently on Interpol's red notice list. Thanks to the company's special security team, the man had managed to evade capture for 10 years. The man then asked if Seoryeong liked money. She replied that she didn't particularly care for it. He commented that she would probably quit once they returned, since most people turned pale and fled unless they were desperate for money. Some had even begged to leave while crying, and others had tried reporting them to the police. Seoryeong interrupted him, saying that was enough, as she needed to clean up first. The man frowned, asking what that meant and if she was scared, reminding her that she said she wasn't desperate for money either. Seoryeong calmly replied that she thought the place was a gold mine of sorts, confusing him. In her mind, she believed it was indeed a gold mine, the kind the National Intelligence Service would love to uncover. She felt oddly refreshed, realizing the company was even filthier than she had imagined. Later that night, while Seoryeong was cleaning the doors and shelves, Lee Woo-shin entered the room, asking if she had signed the confidentiality agreement. Seoryeong turned her face slightly away and affirmed. Lee Woo-shin said she must have been briefed on the overall job description and asked why she was still there. He added that no matter how much he thought about it, he couldn't wrap his head around her decision. She must have heard about the dirty work they handled, so why was she still covered in dust, working like a cleaner? Seoryeong replied that the hygiene in the place was terrible, so she had been cleaning. She glanced at Lee Woo-shin, thinking if that wasn't the kind of answer he wanted. Lee Woo-shin appeared irritated by her response, saying she was there to help with illegal operations, not tidy up. He reminded her she was supposed to cook meals for the men assembling guns used to guard drug trafficking routes, yet she was acting like they were just putting parts together. If necessary, those men would beat people within an inch of their lives. Seoryeong answered that he was the one who put her name on the business trip list in the first place. Lee Woo-shin cut her off, saying that despite that, she still insisted on cleaning up such a filthy place, visibly frustrated by her choice.